first, this happened.
We have decided that the 500 rupee and 1000 rupee currency notes presently in use will no longer be legal tender from midnight to night.
Then, this happened.
We are also introducing a 2000 rupee note which carries photo of Mangalyan. These denominations size will be little smaller than the existing notes and they will be released to the market.
And then finally, this.
These 2000 notes was introduced with the primary purpose of replenishing the currency. That purpose has been fulfilled. We are therefore withdrawing it from circulation, these 2000 rupee notes, but they continue as legal tender.
A strong central government, a devoted central bank, and a cohort of faceless, voiceless bankers, anxious to avoid the nightmares of 2016, will quietly observe over the next few months whether the army of cash hoarders and money launderers in the country have grown and how they behave. Will they swap the 2000 rupee notes using the services of men ready to stand in queues for a small fee? Will they deposit it with banks? Or having endured the travails of demonetisation and the hounding by the tax office, will they change tack this time? These are the questions ET's Sugata Ghosh raised in a recent edit page article titled 2000 Currency Notes, Folding or Unfolding. But is economics the only angle here, or are state elections and politics at play as well? To answer all these questions, we hear from R. Gandhi, a former deputy governor who served during demonetisation and argues that the panic is overdone.
They are totally two different, completely different actions. In 2016, it was demonetisation per se. Right now, it is not demonetisation.
Economic Times MC Govardhan Rangan and Sugata Ghosh also join in to explore the policy push. We also hear from DMK spokesperson Sarvanan Annadurai, who says the calendar of events and elections cannot be overlooked.
So they wanted to put the opposition party on hold. That is why they introduced the demonetisation 2016. Now ahead of the crucial elections in 4 other states. They want to do this and put the opposition on check.
It's Tuesday, May 30th. From the Economic Times, I'm your host Anupriya Nair and you're listening to the 2000 rupee recall. Clean note policy or dirty politics here on the Morning Brief. So as many draw parallels to the 2016 demonetisation event, the RBI has been quick to soothe nerves and offer explanations.
Let me assure, चिंता की कोई कारण नहीं है. आप आराम से एक्सचेंज करिए नोट. आपका जितना कोई भी कंप्लेंट हो, कोई भी डिफिकल्टी कठिनाइयां हो, हम बैंकों के थ्रू या डायरेक्टली हम तो उसको मॉनिटर कर रहे हैं.
But what really is Min Street's thinking and intentions? And how is this move really impacting the ecosystem? I picked the brains of ET's banking editor Govardhan Rangan, or Govi as he's more popularly called, making his debut on the Morning Brief, and Sugata Ghosh, associate editor with Economic Times and a regular feature on the TMB podcast. Welcome, gentlemen, and let me start with you, Govi. What's really the aim and intention of the central bank?
The central bank's rationality can be many things, including what they call a clean note policy, and they don't want to keep the old notes in circulation. And every currency has a particular life, and this also has run out of its life because they last printed it in 2019, and after that they have not done it. So this will all get old. But in the case of 2000, this particular currency, there is another tale. The entire demonetization exercise itself was for taking the high value currency notes out of the system in the name of black money, because the high value currency notes are the ones that are used to have this high value transactions, highly priced, whether it's real estate, gold. So they want to, the entire exercise was to take that out. But you cannot have a denomination which is double that of the highest value which you demonetized going on in circulation. So this had to come to an end one day, and that has happened.
Sugata, now is what many people are questioning. There are some political twists as well, and we'll get to that in the conversation where we speak to DMK a bit later. But is the timing something one needs to ponder a little bit more about?
Well, it had to happen someday.
There can be two reasons why it's happening now. Probably the government and RBI had a number in mind and were waiting for the value of the 2000 notes to shrink to that level, that number they had in mind. The second reason, of course, is to wage another war against black money, in the black money lying in the form of undisclosed notes. Now this theory, of course, has far too many takers, and particularly because so many important state elections are slated towards the end of the year. Now, even though the stated objective is to simply phase out a note which is nearing its life. Now, as you know, a higher value note has a longer life because it changes hands fewer times. But given the objectives and the memories of 2016, and of course the government's obsession with black money, one can never rule out that the real target of the 2000 withdrawal is the cash holders.
So continuing with that thought, Shugato, who's really impacted? I mean, I didn't have any 2000 rupee notes, and most people I know were not rushing to make an exchange of a worthwhile value either.
Well, what I sense is that it would largely impact those who have good reasons to hide the cash. Now, they have kept it hidden so far, and there is no reason why they should deposit it and face taxation, penalties, and even prosecution. So at over 10.5% of the currency in circulation, 3.6 lakh crore. Now, it's not a small number. So these people who try to figure out, this number may be concentrated, unlike the 1,000 on the 500 rupee notes, which are across households. So these people who try to figure out a way to exchange these notes, they would probably use the branches of State Bank, which announced that no ID would be necessary for swapping the notes. Some of them, we believe, have already bought gold and foreign exchange. And the last weekend, the unofficial premium for gold and foreign exchange had hardened. Some, of course, would spill over into immediate consumption and a bit of luxury spend, even by people who may not have really anything to hide. Because last time, even those who had genuine cash savings of 3 lakh, 5 lakhs, I mean, there are households who keep that money with them. And when they deposited that later, they faced income tax notices. They had to deal with that. So why take the trouble? Spend some, switch some. And if you're left with just a lakh or 2 lakhs, go and deposit. So I think that's how it would play out.
And before the end game plays out, we spoke to someone who is really impacted. TMB producer Sumit Pandey, in fact, caught up with Ajay Bansal, the president of the All India Petrol Pump Association, who reiterated that all is not as smooth as one imagines, and there is a severe shortage of change and even the fear of the taxman.
आम पब्लिक में थोड़ा पैनिक ही हुआ है कि भाई घर में जो भी 2000 के नोट की करेंसी होगी वो डिस्पोज ऑफ करना चाहते हैं, लेके जाना चाहते हैं. तो सबसे सॉफ्ट और सबसे इजी जो है कि आप पंप पे चले जाएं और पंप पे इसको दे दें. एक्सचेंज के लिए तो यहाँ पर नहीं है, लेकिन रहा है कि आदमी 100 रुपये का पेट्रोल ले रहा है और 2000 का नोट दे रहा है और वो उससे 1900 रुपये एक्सपेक्ट करता है कि हमें वो रिटर्न में मिलेगा. तो ऐसे बहुत से इंसिडेंट्स हुए कि या कस्टमर को हमने हमारे पंप पे मना किया गया कि आप जितने का पेट्रोल ले रहे हैं वही आप हमें दे करेंसी, चाहे 2000 का नोट दे रहे हैं तो 2000 का पेट्रोल ले लीजिए. चेंज जो वापस करनी है, जो हमें करेंसी नोट स्मॉल साइज के नोट्स हैं वो अगर अवेलेबल नहीं है तो हमारे लिए बड़ी प्रॉब्लम बन गई है. हमें जो है वो छोटी करेंसी का जो है वो अभाव हो गया, कम हो गई है, एक शॉर्टेज आ गई है हमारे यहाँ पे सभी जगह पर. तो ये इस चीज़ को जानते हुए हमने अभी प्रेस स्टेटमेंट दी है और एक लेटर लिखा आरबीआई को कि भाई इस चीज़ को हमारे सीरियसली ले और ये कहे कि या तो हमें वो बैंक से हमें छोटे नोट उपलब्ध कराए सो दैट हम लोग इसको आराम से पब्लिक को रिफंड करना पड़ता है. जो भी उसका बिल आता है उसका जो बाकी बैलेंस है वो हम लोग रिफंड ऑन स्मॉलर नोट दे सकें. तो वो एक हमारी डिमांड थी, क्योंकि हमारे यहाँ पे एक अच्छी खासी एक करेंसी कैश की जो है वो मूव होती है, तो वो हमारे लिए एक परेशानी का कारण बनी हुई है और हम लोग उसको चाहते हैं कि वो पूरी तरह से गवर्नमेंट के तरीके से और प्रॉपर तरीके से वो हैंडल हो. पिछली बार भी डिमोनेटाइजेशन के टाइम पर 2016 में हुआ था, उसमें भी पंप्स के ऊपर क्या हुआ कि हमने जब जो नोट्स लिए पुराने नोट्स और के अंदर हमने उनको फिर बैंक्स में लेके गए तो हमें आईटी के नोटिस आए, इनकम टैक्स डिपार्टमेंट की रेड हुई पंपों पे और नोटिस आए जिसकी आप अभी भी कईयों के चल रहे हैं. तो उस टाइम पे लोगों ने पब्लिक ने जो हमारे पेमेंट्स है, कई बार ट्रांसपोर्टर बड़ी पेमेंट भी करते हैं वो हैं, या फिर डेली जो है वो पुराने नोट्स थे वो जमा कराए हमने, बैंक से हमें तंग किया, उसके बाद अब इनकम टैक्स की तरफ से वो आते रहे. तो कहीं ऐसा ना हो कि कल हम लोग आज जो है हमारी करेंसी जो नॉर्मली 10 टाइम्स बढ़ गई, जो हमारा मान लीजिए एक नोट आता था 10 नोट आ रहे हैं 2000 का, तो वो जो हम लोग डिपॉजिट कर रहे हैं, वी आर अफ्रेड कि अगेन देन देयर विल बी नोटिसेस एंड रेड्स ऑन अस, so that will create a problem for us, and we want the government to either give us a guideline कि अगर जो कोई आदमी 2 नोट से ज्यादा दे रहा है तो we need to take their आधार कार्ड और पैन कार्ड और समथिंग। और दूसरा ये कि अगर जो हमें उनको कंपल्सन है हमारी कि हमें उस करेंसी नोट को ऑनर करना है, they fees buying a lesser amount than 2000 note and we are supposed to accept that 200 currency note, तो जो बैलेंस उसका जो रिफंड करना है उसके लिए हमें कुछ सपोर्ट पे कराए, हमें उसकी सप्लाई कराए, सो दैट कि हम लोग उनको आम पब्लिक को दे सकें। दिस इज द मेन पर्पस ऑफ आवर स्टेटमेंट एंड रिक्वेस्ट लेटर टू द आरबीआई गवर्नर।
Govi, we just heard from the petrol pump dealers on the problems that they are facing or anticipating to face as well from the taxman. What is the RBI hoping will be the end result? I mean, there is a large cash economy still at play. Some of it is unaccounted for, some of it is legitimate. Is this the last big leg attempt to curb the unaccounted economy and bring it back into the formal system?
The cash economy, the need for people's cash, okay, irrespective of whether you have a digital, whether you have 100 or 500, there is a particular need for cash that will always remain. That cannot be changed. That will happen over a period of time in terms of how they use digital payments and all those things. That is the number one. So that's, you are not really going to target how much cash that should be in circulation. If the people need it, you have to give it as much as they want. The second one here is that now, in this case, the 2000 rupees. So if it comes into the system, into the banking system, then the expectation is that some of it will stay back in the banking system and slowly they'll be able to get rid of this high value transactions which are still happening, which is also, despite all your demonetization, GST, it's common knowledge that there's a huge parallel economy that's still running and that is running with these kind of high value notes. So can you reduce it a bit? Yes, you can reduce it a bit. And internationally also, there is always an argument that even in the West, why do you need to have 100 euros or $100? So you don't need that. If it is for transactional purposes, a $50 and $100, okay, you don't need 200, 500, all kinds of things. So likewise, in India also, there is a particular, probably you don't need beyond 500 for transactional purposes. So this is what probably they are trying to achieve. It is only for transactional purposes.
Shugata, you wrote in a recent edit piece as well that this may not play out as intended. In fact, a lot of the 2000 rupees cash may still stay unaccounted for and will probably just take larger space in the hoarder's cupboard.
Well, you see, what people expected didn't happen last time. So there was a widely shared expectation by the government as well as bankers that a lot of money would not come back in 2016. But we saw that almost the entire money came back. Now, people who had undisclosed money had deposited it and offered for taxation. And there were long court cases. The assessments were reopened as late as 2021. And many of these cases are lying in tribunal and high court. So it is a long story which played out for people who had never really knew how to explain the cash deposits. So given that experience, this time we are seeing a more concentrated hoarding of cash by people. I don't expect them to go all out and deposit that cash this time. So they will try to exchange it. How they do it, whether they will employ people to stand in queues in different branches. Now you have a lot of time. You have almost 4 months to organize it. So my bet is that I don't think more than 50% of the money would come back.
So it just comes down to the 30th of September date at this point. I think the bigger question now is what happens beyond that point. Govi, is there a timeline you think the RBI has or a number that the RBI has that if we get X amount of currency that is in circulation right now back with us, we're done with this exercise? Does the deadline get extended if it doesn't? What are you picking up?
My guess is that, so there have been debates inside whether you should keep, the way this scheme has been designed, you have said that it is open. Okay, you can come and exchange and deposit as much as you want. There's no limit to K20 without proof identification. When you have done so much leeway for people to convert it, in some cases where without even identity, where people could do, is there a need for a deadline in the first place? That's the question, right? So there have been debates and then, so there are people who didn't want the deadline at all because the way the scheme has been structured, what is the point in keeping a deadline for that? So they don't need a deadline. And my guess is that since RBI has already said that this will remain a legal tender, is it a kind of a promise that RBI has given that, okay, irrespective of whether you give it to me by September 30th or not, I am going to keep it as a legal tender. So this is a promise that RBI has made. Will suddenly RBI go back on its promise? can a central bank on its currency go back on its promise? If the central bank goes back on its promise of keeping this a legal tender, then the implications are completely different. So my guess is that the central bank RBI cannot afford to go back on its promise immediately after September 30th that it's being a legal tender.
So even as the clock continues to tick towards September 30th, I decide to rewind time and go and talk to someone who had a front row seat to demonetization. R. Gandhi, who was deputy governor at the time of the demonetization in 2016. I sit down with him to understand how this is now a very different affair.
2016, the action taken, and 2023, the action that is taken, they are totally two different, completely different actions. In 2016, it was demonetization per se. Right now, it is not demonetization. It is only withdrawal of the notes and the value thereof being given back to public. The objectives of at that time was totally different. There are three broad objectives were there. One is about tackling the black money. The other is about reducing chances for terrorist financing and eliminating chances of counterfeiting notes. Whereas at this time, the objective is to withdraw the high denomination notes, which have consistently come down in terms of volume. So to leave out further small volumes in the hands of the public will not be actually good. So that's why there is a taken decision to withdraw it down. So that's why the objectives are totally different. It is not comparable at all.
So let me then play devil's advocate, sir. Then why have a deadline? If there is a currency that has been taken not out of circulation, but has been stopped printing over the last 4 years, it's only 10% of the currency in circulation. Why wouldn't the central bank just let this note play out its life in the public and find itself come down to almost a minimal non-existent? Let it be a legal tender. Why the urgency to bring it home?
There are two major reasons I would explain why. Because typically central banks withdraw the currency notes. There are two types of withdrawal. One is passive withdrawal, what we call, other is active withdrawal. In the passive withdrawal, the central banks quietly withdraw the currency without telling any deadline to the public. As and when the notes have come back from the public to the banking system, central bank used to quietly take it away. The other method is active withdrawal. In the active withdrawal, the central bank announces that its intention to withdraw a particular series of notes, and it encourages the public to return it back. Because it is publicly announcing, then normally it goes with a deadline. It would say that by this date, you return it back. In the passive withdrawal, typically same denomination in some other new series of notes will be issued. So that is why it is easy to undertake passive withdrawal when the denomination is still available, but only that one series is withdrawn and another series is given. So in an active withdrawal, when the particular denomination is completely withdrawn, like either because lower denomination, many times we introduce coins, and for that reason, the old denomination could be taken back. That could be one reason. The other reason could be, especially in the higher denomination, if lesser and lesser number of pieces are still in circulation. Officially, if it is still in circulation, then it becomes difficult if that particular denomination gets counterfeited. Then the chances are that it will linger on among the public, because public will be finding it very difficult to make a distinction between a forged note and a good note. When less number is in circulation, they can run the risk of counterfeiting. So that's why in the higher denomination, it is always better, after a particular volume has already come back, it is better to actively withdraw rather than linger it for a longer period. The longer period it stays back, then the chances of counterfeiters will always take quite a while. When after a new series of notes are introduced, they will take about several years to kind of hone their skills to counterfeit. And by the time the notes itself is withdrawn, then there is no chance for them to counterfeit. So that is another reason why central banks would decide in favor of active withdrawal. We did that in 2013. When we withdrew the pre-2005 series notes, we did announce that at that time itself, we gave a deadline to the public to return those notes. So that is common. There is nothing special about giving a deadline.
But beyond the economics is the politics of it. With one state election down and 5 more to go, there are many raising the question the timing of the 2000 note wapsi. I caught up with Saravanan Anandurai, the official spokesperson of DMK, who says it's definitely a demonetization deja vu. with a political angle dominating it.
See, we have to go back to 2016. When they announced this demonetization, everybody were very skeptical, of course, except the pro-Modi, pro-RSS, pro-BJP group. Everybody else were not enthused, were not happy the way it was announced, and all the economists, big economists, were there solved. Opined that this is going to be a disastrous for the economy. Let us not forget what Mr. Manmohan Singh, he called it as an organized loot and a legalized plunder. After demonetization, even then, they said introduction of this 2000 rupee note does not make any sense. You are saying you are making this move for curbing black money, but this 2000 rupee note is in fact going to ensure there is going to be more black money. The powers that we did not listen, they have already decided what to do, and they went ahead and not introduced this 2000 rupee note.
But Samina, to understand, one would say that the RBI stopped issuing the 2000 rupee notes about 4 years ago. So the circulation of them has anyway come down. One could argue that the 2000 rupee note was introduced at a time of demonetization to ease the troubles that we're going through. So there is some more currency in circulation. What pain point do you actually see happening with this removal? They've given adequate time. There is no adverse sort of taxation or taxman regulation coming in when you're going to exchange. What exactly is the pain point of this currency withdrawal?
See, that's what. Just because it is not caused alarm, or just because it is not causing any inconvenience, as in 2016, doesn't mean that this is a good move. What is the plan of the government? And apart from the inconvenience or convenience of how this has taken place, let us also not forget the fact that the 2016 demonetization was touted as something which will curb black money. Now the question is, has it done? Has it curbed black money? In fact, the introduction of this 2000 rupee note, probably there is more black money than ever. So who is going to give all the important things? The government does not have a data. If it is a transparent government, they would have been giving data on this is what has happened. This is so much of 2000 rupee in circulation. This is what we have received. This is what, but I don't think this government is worried about all that. And let me also put one more point on record that this demonetization or this, I will call it this demonetization because nobody is accepting a 2000 rupee note except for the banks. Even banks also, they say today's quota is over or this is over, that is over. So this is again a demonetization. What it has allowed is a parallel black market economy to thrive on exchange of these 2000 rupee notes. Whoever has got access to the powers, they are able to sell this for a premium. Happened in 2016, and the same thing is happening now. So the persons who are with black money, who are quoting this 2000 rupee note, they'll just have a small bite. It'll be a small slap on their wrists. They'll pay a commission and get back their money, probably gold or diamonds or whatever.
But I also wanted to understand there's a lot of chatter about the timing of these moves. Last time around as well, it was before a few months before a critical state election. A lot of people are highlighting that there has been a state election that has just passed that has not gone in the favor of the central government. And there's obviously been a general election year now as well. Do you see somewhere that playing into these decisions as well?
Exactly. See, in 2016, if you ask me honestly, what is the reason for introduction of this demonetization? It is to win the Uttar Pradesh elections. They wanted to curb the opposition without any money to spend. See, though the election commission will say this is what the amount the candidate has spent or a political party has to spend, there are other expenses. So they wanted to curb and they wanted to put the other opposition party on hold. That is why they introduced the demonetization 2016. Now ahead of the crucial elections in the 4 other states. One state is over. And now they want to do this and put the opposition on check. Oh, they have this usual response. If you're a good party, you should not have 2000 rupee note, as though 2000 rupees is dirty money. This is what they want to convey. All these RSS handles, the right-wing handles, everybody, they want to convey that if you are having cash, that is bad.
But the ruling party that is currently in process of celebrating 9 years in power is quick to disassociate RBI's move of the 2000 rupee note with the attack on black money that was 7 years ago. Here's an excerpt of BJP spokesperson Shehzad Poonawalla responding to the politics and the timing of the policy during a TV interview a few days ago.
First of all, let me explain that this is not a government decision. It's a decision taken by the RBI, and it's an independent and autonomous body, the RBI. And therefore, the government has no say in this in that sense of it. The RBI handles this policy, and therefore the RBI is at liberty if it feels that it wants to push forward a clean note policy and wants to withdraw gradually out of circulation. And there are elections every 2 months in this country. So then we should have one election in 5 years, and the rest of the time we can get on with policy work. To link this move by the RBI, an independent body, to elections which have not been declared only seems to show that following Jairam Ramesh's practice of tweet first and think later, he's doing speak first and think later.
The 2000 rupee note isn't the first note to bid goodbye, and possibly won't be the last. In fact, India got a 10,000 rupee currency note way back in 1938, which was demonetized in 1946. But it made an introduction again in 1954 to leave ground finally in 1978. No doubt that larger notes serve lesser legal purposes, and the footnote is not that cash is bad. In fact, cash in circulation is now at 12.5% of GDP, which is still above the pre-demonetization levels. Politics or policy, irrespective of what the push was, the 2000 rupee note has sung its swan song, and the clock continues to tick for its final goodbye. How much of the 3.6 lakh crore that is currently in circulation will make it back to Mint Street via banks? One will have to wait and watch. If one has to look at the silver lining in a 2016 comparison, it could be a boost in consumption. During that period, there was a clear rise in conspicuous consumption of high-end items and investments in real estate, presumably driven by individuals who hesitated to reveal their cash reserves. One could anticipate the same this time around, although in a much smaller scale. However, a lingering concern pertains to the potential impact of frequent and significant changes in the validity of a currency on people's confidence in it. Such rapid changes and announcements could potentially erode trust in the currency and motivate individuals to seek alternative options. Till the next one, it's a wrap. You've been listening to the 2000 rupee recall, clean note policy or dirty politics, with me, Anupriya Nair, here on The Morning Brief, brought to you by The Economic Times. A note of appreciation to the ET Insights brought by the in-house editorial guests, and a shout-out to the team that put this together. Sumit Pandey on production and Rajas Nayak on the sound. Executive producers, Arijit Anirban and yours truly. An exciting week ahead for the podcast team at ET, a corner office conversation with AWS CEO coming up on June 1st. You don't want to miss it. Catch it on Thursday on the choice of your podcast platform. Thank you for listening in and have a great week ahead.